Assalamualaikum and hi. In this video, I'm going to go through with you the solutions for Java exercise number 9, where specifically for this exercise, you're given a scenario, as you can see, and you will need to draw a flowchart and also write pseudocodes to represent the scenario described above. And we'll also need to explain the two programming structure involved. And note that you are not required to write a Java program for this exercise. But anyhow, I'm going to show you the Java codes as well. I think that will be helpful for your understandings of the whole exercise as well. So the first thing here is I'm first going to show you the flowchart which I have drew based on the scenario given. So let's go through the scenario first, then only be looking into the flowchart. Basically, the scenario here is you need to write a Java programs that prompt the user to enter numbers one at a time. After each number is entered, the program will ask the user if they wish to add a number. This process continues iteratively. So there are some keywords here to indicate the programming structure involved. For example, in this case, if it's iterative, then you know that it involves looping until the users decide to stop. And the users can indicate their desire to stop by entering -1. Finally, the program will display the total number of all the numbers entered, right? So we are going to look into the flowchart which I've drew here. So we know that the most important thing when you're asked to draw a flowchart is that you need to use the correct shape to indicate the correct elements within a flowchart. So for example, here, we need to use the oval shape for start and end. We need to use the rectangle for the process. We need to use the diamond shape for decisions. For the input, we use parallelograms, whereas for output, we use the hybrid shape. So basically here you can see we start the program here. We initialize the total sum as 0 because this is for us to calculate the sum of all the number later on. And then we first ask the user to input a number, just like what required here. We prompt the user to enter number 1 at a time. And after that, we are going to check whether the number is -1 or not. Why we need to do the checking is because if we look back into the scenario here, it says that the user can indicate their desire to stop by entering -1, which means if the user input -1, okay, the program will stop. So when the program stops, then you will see that it's going to display the total sum. So the logic is represented here, where we have a diamond shape to indicate a decisions making here, or if you like, a if-else statement. So if the number is -1, then I'm going to display the total sum right away. If it is not -1, if some other numbers, for example, it can be 2, 3, or 4, then I'm going to add that number one by one so that I can calculate the total sum later on. So here, if the number is not -1, then you can see a process here where I indicates that total sum plus equal number. We know that total sum plus equal number is equal to total sum equal to total sum plus number. So we're going to add the number one by one. After we do the calculations of the sum, then we go back and we ask the user to input another number, because we know that if the number is not -1, then we need to continue to ask the user to input the number. Okay, so that's the flowchart that indicates or to illustrate the whole scenario given. Now let's move on to the second part, is to write pseudocodes to represent the scenario described. We know that pseudocodes, we can represent that in the form of natural language, or it can be something which is much more like the Java codes. So I've prepared a pseudocode down here. As you can see, you always need to have the start and also the end, okay? And then within that, the key or the kind of like the strategy is that you try to think about what are the input involved, what are the process involved, and what are the output involved in the scenario given. So for example, in our case here, the input will be we ask the user to enter a number. So that will be the input. Okay, but of course, before that, we need to initialize the total sum, because we know that from the whole scenario givens, we will need to calculate the total sum. Okay, so the process here is we're going to do a few checking. So for example, here, if the number is not equal to -1, then I'm going to do the calculations. Okay, then if the number is equal to -1, then I'm going to end the process and I'm going to display the total sum. Okay, so you can easily translate these to Java codes later on. But if you don't want to do something like this, then you can write in the form of natural language. So for example, so here within the process, I can just write if number is not equal to -1, perform calculations, or you can say calculate the sum. Okay, so you can do something like this if you do not want to do something which is much more like Java code. So that's both are acceptable. Okay, so that will be the pseudocode here. I think the key will be, as long as you can write something that demonstrate your understanding of the scenario given, then that will be fine. Because the purpose of the pseudocode, again, is for you to later on translate that into Java codes in this case. Now, the third part of the question is we need to explain the two programming structure involved. I think if you are able to draw the flowchart and if you're able to write the pseudocode, then you should be able to answer these questions. We already learned about the three main types of programming structure, okay, or the kind of like the building blocks of algorithms. We know that the first is the sequential structure, okay. The second one is the selections, or we call it as decision. And the third one is the iterations, okay, or if you like, will be looping, okay. So you can see here, if I look back into the flowchart, I can see that, okay, I have a decision structure here, because here I need to check whether the number is any number that is other than 1 or is -1, right? -1, not 1. Okay, so if the number is -1, then I need to stop the programs. I will need to display the output. And if not, then I will need to continue to ask the user to input a number. So we know that the answer here can be 2, the selections or decisions. Of course, you will need to kind of like do some explanations here within the context of the scenario given. So for example, you can write here the programs will need to check if the number input by the user is -1 or not. Okay, if the number is -1, then the program will display the output. Okay, else the programs will continue to ask user to input a number. Okay, so these part of the programs involve, we can say, decisions making, right? Just to show that you understand what is the selections programming structure. Okay, and of course the second one will be the iterations. If we look back into here, we calculate the total sum and then we go back here, okay, and continue to ask the user to input a number. Okay, so we can say that here the programs will continuously or continue to ask user to input a number, okay, and calculate the sum within the loop. Okay, so you can write something like this, as long as, again, you can demonstrate your understandings of the selections and the iterations programming structure. And again, when you're asked to explain the programming structures, try to relate that to the scenario given. Okay, so you can provide a brief definitions of selections or iteration structure, and then provide an example which you can link to the scenario given. Okay, as promised earlier, I'm going to show you the Java code based on the scenario given above, even though, as I say, it's not required for this exercise. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to write the code here. As we know, we need to ask for the user input. So whenever we need to ask for user input, then we will need to have the scanner class from the utility package. Okay, and we will need to create the scanner object. You should know how to create a scanner object by now. I create a scanner object here where the name of the scanner object is actually my object. New scanner system.in. Okay, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to initialize the variable here, integer total sum equal to 0. It's just like what I have done here in my pseudocode. So basically, I'm just looking at my pseudocode and then translate that into Java codes. Okay. But here, even though I have some if here, but I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a looping, because we know that, as you can see previously, it involves iterations or the looping programming structure. Well, before I do the looping, I'm just going to declare the number as well, variables, to get the user input. So here I'm going to use a while loop. Okay, I'm going to use a while loop here because we do not know how many iterations involved in this case. Okay, the user can input as many numbers as he or she likes. So I'm going to use the while loop. Remember, we mentioned previously where we use while loop if we do not know how many iterations or how many times the looping will go, right? So while I can do something like this. So number equal to, I'm going to read the user input within these expressions here. My object dot next integer, assume that all the user input will be with the data type integer, not equal to -1. Remember, if we look back into the scenario, or even if we look into the pseudocode here, if it's not equal to 1, then we will continue to ask for the user input and we calculate the total, right? So here, of course, I will need to add a parenthesis here. So basically what does it means here is if the user input, right, if the user input is not equal to -1, then open and close brace here, I will do total sum plus equal number. Okay, so this is similar to the one that we have written down in our flowchart just now. Okay, and if it's -1, so outside of the loop, then I'm just going to print the total sum. Okay, now I'm just going to add some instructions here, system.out.println. Okay, where I say please enter a number. Okay, and I might just want to add -1 to n, which indicates that if we enter -1, then we're going to end the programs. I'm going to copy and paste this here within the loop, where I'm going to ask the user to input a number. So that will be the first number enter. We check on the conditions, and then we keep on the looping as long as the input is not -1. So if the input is -1, then we're going to print the total. Let's try to run this. Okay, so please enter a number. Let's say it's 2, and a number 3, and a number 4. Okay, so I know that the sum should be 9 here. So I want to end the loop, I just do -1. So I see the total sum here, which is 9 here. Okay, so that is the kind of like the sample code for the scenario given above. Okay, so I hope through this exercise you enhance your understanding of how to draw a flowchart, how to write pseudocodes, and the 3 common types of programming structures. Thank you very much.